Art doesn't pay. VFX is an unstable industry. There's too much competition. It's oversaturated. How many myths are we feeding off of to keep ourselves down? When we set the bar so low that it's reality for a lot of us that we can't be successful as an artist in the creative industry, that art isn't a real career. It's no wonder a lot of us aren't successful at what we do when we set the bar so low. We're proving ourselves right by having these limitations on ourselves. If we tell ourselves all the time that art doesn't pay, that art's not a real career, that struggle is expected of us, then that's the reality we create for ourselves. And it means that we're never going to question it, we're just going to abide by it. A lot of us struggle with our career. We feed into that mindset that it's okay to struggle, it's cool to struggle, all-nighters and stressful deadlines are just something that we wear as a badge of honor. So I've done a lot of late-nighters, and I seriously would challenge most of you as to who's clocked in the most hours, and who's risked their health more on a project. I've done 150-hour weeks consistently for 3 months where I would sleep at my desk. I had hotel rooms paid for the entire time that I never got to visit. I'd let my friends who were visiting stay at my hotel because I'd be sleeping on the floor those 3 to 5 hours a week that I would actually get. And this is all stuff that for me for a long time I thought was normal, that I'm just going to tough through it. And then every time I would get sick. Eventually, there was permanent damage. There was a time I couldn't walk for an entire year. These have just become the norm for me for the longest time. So the thing is, now that I look back at a lot of those expectations I had set on myself, the standards I had set for myself were pretty ridiculous. I don't have to work crazy hours. I can earn 100K a year. I could earn 200K a year. I could have a life. I could be treated properly. I could be successful. I could have a career. I could have a real career, waking up every day, doing the thing I love, going to work on visual effects for movies. So at the beginning of our career, we feed on so much BS. We then go into the world with that idea that that's how it is. We set the bar so low and expect everything to be a struggle, we forget to even try in the first place. My channel has always been about doing the work and putting in the time. It's never been about, you could be successful, just do these little things. It's shut the hell up, do the work, but be smart about it. Have a strategy, have a plan, and execute on that. There's no magic formula to it, but most of us aren't doing that. We just say, well, that's just how it is, and we never even try in the first place. I want to reset for a moment and propose that we start to try again. I want to start with breaking some of the barriers that we set on ourselves holding us back. So let's talk about the 50K myth. Okay, so really quick, I just want to thank Skillshare for sponsoring this video, and if you like learning and you like this channel and you want to help out and make sure that future videos like this one get made, take a second to click the link below this video and you'll get instant access to Skillshare's learning platform for free for 2 months. So not only will you get access to all of their classes, which are hundreds of them, you'll specifically be able to find all the information you need on very niche topics that us as creatives love to get into. Whether it is how to use a camera or more the technical side, such as how a camera sensor works or how to get that perfect shot, everything you need to know is in there, as well as how to learn compositing, such as with After Effects or many of the other compositing software on the platform. In addition, you better learn Max, Maya, Houdini, every single 3D tool that you can imagine. I'm a big fan of learning just in time rather than just in case. So in other words, I want to have instant access to the information that I need at that specific time. So I love being able to log into Skillshare and have access to all of their classes and be able to find exactly what I need when I need it, and then be able to get back to what I'm doing right away. So, like I said, if you want to take advantage of this offer, click the link below this video to get instant access to Skillshare's premium level membership for 2 free months. So take advantage of this offer by clicking the link below right now. And thanks for supporting this channel. So at the beginning of my career, I was earning $25,000 a year. And I thought that was pretty good because I had this idea in my mind that art doesn't pay, that in reality, artists could probably make about $50,000 a year. That would be about the cap that you could make in your entire career. So it meant that I'm doing pretty good. In terms of where I'm at, I don't really need to try that much harder. So I just got to keep doing what I'm doing and eventually I'll hit that mark. In other words, it's a very linear process. So my mind was 50K was the max you could earn as an artist, a game developer, TV, film, whatever industry that might be. So by thinking small, it meant that my goals shrunk to fit that pattern. So a few years went by and I was earning about $33,000 a year. And that's when a few of my colleagues opened up to me that they were earning $100,000 a year. And that completely shattered my reality. So after realizing what was possible, it didn't take me that long to start earning $100,000 a year as well. And this is something really important to think about. I'm on this linear path where over my career, I'm essentially coasting. I'm getting towards the 50K over the next 10, 15 years. Once I knew it was possible, I had such a massive, giant leap in salary. It sounds so unrealistic to have such a giant jump in my salary just by finding out that it was possible, that 50K myth in my mind was actually just that. It was a myth. So I want to break something down that I think is related to this, why I was able to get those results. And it wasn't magic. It wasn't like I believed it. I went to sleep every night thinking about, give me 100 grand. And one day I woke up and it was under my pillow and everything worked out. It wasn't like that at all. There's a lot behind why it worked. And it all makes sense to me, and it's something that I've replicated throughout my entire career, as has everybody else I know who's had success in their career. So something I've talked about before is the 4-minute mile. So the whole idea of this is that in 1954, everybody believed in the 4-minute mile barrier. It was impossible to run a mile in less than 4 minutes. So this was fact, that you cannot run a mile in less than 4 minutes. Everybody in the entire world had tried to break the barrier. It was completely impossible, so this became the reality. So in comes Roger Bannister, the first person to break reality for a lot of people. He broke the 4-minute mile barrier, 3 minutes and 59.4 seconds. So what was once fact was now brought into question. So here's what fascinates me. Once Roger had ran a mile in less than 4 minutes, it didn't take that long until everybody else was able to do it as well. And since then, the record itself has been broken 1,400 times. So this is what I love. Why could nobody break the 4-minute mile barrier? And then once he showed that it was possible, everybody else could do it. Everyone else could run a mile in less than 4 minutes. In fact, they could do it better and faster than he could. So this is why the 4-minute mile sticks in my head. That we have these boundaries that we put on ourselves because we set our reality to be around these limitations, that we can tell ourselves that we can't do this or that's impossible, the industry sucks, art doesn't pay, everything sucks. These are the reality. These are the constraints or the excuses that we put on ourselves to dismiss anything that possibly could be real. That becomes our reality. So how many things are you telling yourself you can't do or that nobody can do? But this isn't like woo-woo fluffy stuff. I'm not the person driving around the parking structure asking the universe to give me that perfect parking spot next to the elevator. But there is going to be things that we instantly do dismiss as being BS or made up or fake because it isn't set in the reality that we live. For you, art might not pay. That might be your reality. For you, work might be a lot of struggle. It might be hard. It might be a lot of hours and everyone is always breathing down your neck. That's the reality that you've set up or that you've gone to accept that there is no other option. So this is just our way of dismissing something because we love making excuses not to try. So if it's not possible, I don't have to try. But when you hear something, you can choose to believe it or you can choose to dismiss it, or you can do what I do and choose to entertain the idea or challenge it. So when I hear someone tell me that you can make $100,000 as an artist doing what you love, that makes me think, well, what if that was possible? So when I had my 50K myth challenged, my $50,000 a year challenged, I could make an excuse or I could entertain the idea. I could make an excuse and say that, yeah, right, like that's BS, that's a fluke, or that might work for you, that won't work for me, or you've got this special thing, or maybe in your industry, but not in mine. All the typical stuff that we say all the time. Or I could entertain the idea. So that was a big moment of reflection for me. Now I wasn't halfway towards my goal. There was a lot more room to grow. So in other words, before my threshold was here, 25K, 50K. So in other words, there wasn't room to grow. It's like, okay, well, I'm going to cap out around somewhere up here. That's all I'm going to do. But now that instead I'm down here because the threshold's much higher, it means that the current trajectory, and this is important, the current trajectory I'm on isn't going to work. How long would it take me to get to 100K? Maybe 20, 30 years based on my current trajectory. But knowing that there's room to grow, maybe I got to look at things a little bit differently. Maybe I got to change things up. Maybe I need to change my strategy. So the way I was able to do it was I now had bigger goals to go after, which meant that if I were to take a step back and look at what I needed to do, the current trajectory wasn't working. So I needed to apply myself. I needed to build that new strategy. I need to know what I'm worth. I need to figure out, well, how can I get to that bigger goal? So firstly, I was selling myself short. So knowing that there was room to grow, I now had a better understanding of my worth. So that meant that I was comfortable asking for more, and I was more motivated to do more to work towards that goal. And the only reason I was able to do that was that now I knew that was possible. So if my reality as an artist was that I didn't make much money, I was going to aim low, and I was also going to negotiate small. And that's because I'd heard enough people online, the negative Nancy's, complaining that the industry sucks, there's no money, it's an oversaturated industry, it's unfair, it's unstable, all the regular excuses not to try in the first place. And a lot of the time that we make those excuses because of that threshold, that we're doing pretty good. And the reason we're not doing better is because you can't get any better. There's no room to grow. And if that reality was true, then instead of being, 80% towards your goal of like you're doing good, suddenly you're now at the bottom. And why is that? Why are you not doing good? You got all this way to go. And so a lot of us rather push that away because they're happy saying, no, it's not me, it's the industry. It's not me, it's everything else. It's because this isn't possible for me in this industry. Because the industry doesn't pay that well, or my country, the wages are really low. Whatever we want to do to say that it's them, not me, the reason that I'm not getting those results, or those results aren't possible. So when that reality was challenged for me, that artists can make money, that removed the entire barrier for me. What that meant is, instead of saying it's the industry or blaming the industry or other excuses, it meant that I could look at myself and say, well, what am I doing? What do I need to be doing? Because if I'm already 3/4 of the way to my goal, there's not that much room to grow. But when I realize that I'm actually at the bottom, that's when I know that I've got a long way to go. It also makes me want to develop a new strategy that actually would have a better trajectory. So anytime I've ever been handed a piece of information that challenged my reality, it would take me down a rabbit hole of like what else is possible. So I like telling the story of like my wife's cat. And this cat was an indoor cat his entire life. And he'd never been outside up until a certain point. And then I took him outside a couple of times, and then he became obsessed with going outside. So like I said, before he was only an indoor cat. But when you find out that there's more, then for many of us, that's what drives us to do more. And I think it's worth mentioning this too, that some of us get offended. They get offended by the talk of money, but you might also get offended that I say something is possible for you to do more than you currently are. So for some of us, it's a reflection of we aren't where we want to be. And that might be that you aren't aiming high enough, or you just don't want to put the work in to get there. So it's more comforting to think that something might be true, or that it's the industry that sucks and that's just how it is. So most of us just don't want to put in the work. Most of us don't want to step out of our comfort zone. But if you do get triggered, it might be good to lean into those pains. I've always found it insightful to see those moments, those pain barriers when they do come up. Especially if you just instantly shoot them down without question, because a lot of us react differently. But when we're dismissing ideas and saying that they're all BS, chances are we just don't want to put in the work. So that's where we have external excuses. BS, industry sucks, everything sucks, art doesn't pay, the typical stuff that I mentioned earlier. That won't work in my country, maybe that'll work for film, but it won't work for design. All of those are external excuses. Like I said, you can dismiss, you can accept, or you can entertain. In other words, challenge the idea. What if that was possible? What would that look like? What would I need to do to get those results? Again, if other people are getting those results, then it is possible. You can either make an excuse around it, or you can choose to entertain it. The other part is internal excuses or internal friction. When we say that might work for you, but it won't work for me, you need to pay attention to how you feel. Because whether those excuses are really excuses or discomforts, or there's other reasons why you instantly dismiss them as being impossible. So for a lot of us, we're saying running a mile in less than 4 minutes is impossible. We're still clinging on to the older reality. Even though there are people who are actually doing it. well, that might work for you, but it won't work for me, not in my industry anyway. Like I said, these are the typical things that we keep saying. So once you stop seeing everything as being impossible, you have something to aspire to. I stopped saying that that's impossible, and I started saying, well, how does that apply to me? How can I do that? Might not seem like much, but it's a completely different mindset. It's the difference between a roadblock or an obstacle to navigate around. So rather than it being a belief that just isn't possible, it's kind of like when Roger Bannister showed the world you can run a mile in under 4 minutes. And then everybody else started warping their reality and achieving those results as well, rather than it being impossible. So every single time I hit a wall and thought that's impossible to go any further, what changed everything was when I saw somebody else do it. So knowing they can meant that I now know it's possible, I just got to figure it out. Figure it out, build a new strategy, apply myself, get off my ass, stop making excuses as to why I can't do it, because obviously others had. And I think that's the critical thing here. Once you've seen that someone else can do it, once the 4-minute mile is broken, you now have no excuse. So I've heard this a lot in my career, which was people would come up to me occasionally I'd be working with or at other places, maybe 9 or 10 times in my entire life, but it would be, hey, when I first started, I saw what you did with your career and I thought, if Alan can do it, so can I. And that was my motivation to focus more on my career. And at first, I didn't really understand what that meant. You know, if Alan can do it, so can I. Alan, you know, if he can do it, then clearly I can do it. Whatever, but as long as it worked, as long as they were getting results, that's what I cared about. But it was something that the more that I heard it, the more I started to wonder. And I asked people like, okay, so I've heard that before. What does that mean? And they said, well, I saw that you had done it, and I figured if someone else has done it, then it's possible. That means I can do it too. So whether it's me or whether it's other people, if you have a career or a lifestyle that you want and you think it's not possible, and when you see someone has and they are where you want to be, sometimes it's a matter of dumbing it down. Well, if they can do it, so can I. And remember, there's nothing that sets them aside from you, other than, for some of us, the excuse that we tell ourselves not to try in the first place. And of course, that's the problem. Some of us want results, but we don't want to put in the work. So the last couple of things I want to talk about is that we are all habit builders, and we're also habit breakers as well. We build positive habits, we also build negative habits. So when we're setting goals, sometimes it's impossible until you're willing to break some of the current habits and mindsets that you currently have. So that means that we have work to do. We need to set bigger goals, we need to change our strategy entirely. It all starts with asking the right questions and setting the right goals. And I also think it's important to sometimes set goals that we think are sometimes not achievable, that they're not possible, that they're too big a goal. And the reason for this is because for some of us, we might say, well, I'm going to set these goals. And they're very easy goals to do. And that's us patting ourselves on the back by setting the barrier low. It's called low-hanging fruit. In other words, by lowering the bar, it's a lot easier to get to what we're doing. But if we were to raise the bar and do something that is a little bit obnoxious, a little bit out there, and what we would typically say is impossible because we don't see that linear path, that trajectory to getting there, that is the big change. That's when we can say, well, that's impossible, but it isn't impossible. That's impossible with what we're currently doing. And this is where the real change happens. When we set a goal that is impossible, it forces us to take a step back, not forward, not say, okay, I'm going to get focused, I'm going to go out there and do it. It means that now we're going to take a step back and say, what I'm currently doing isn't working. So maybe there's a better way. Maybe I got to think of a different way to approach the problem so that way I can achieve it. That way I can solve the issue. I can figure out a better way to get the result in a different direction. The other aspect of this is by setting bigger goals, it's going to force you to fail up. So if you have a goal of getting 3 clients by the end of the year, and this is an actual example of one of my friends and his business, he had a goal of 3 clients by the end of the year. And I said, dude, make it 12. And he's like, that's impossible. I would never get 12. It's like, do it. Your goal is 12 clients by the end of the year. That's what happened. He set that goal and he didn't hit it. He hit 8. So he didn't get to that goal. But what it meant was that the current trajectory is on. Maybe he could get to 3 by the end of the year, but more likely he'll probably get to 2. He's not going to hit his mark. But by aiming higher, it meant that what he's currently doing isn't working. He's got to say, well, if I'm going to get 12, I got to do it differently because this isn't going to work. The current strategy I have is not going to yield that result. So he'd go back to the drawing board. He started to listen to his clients and say, well, what do you want? He had a software company in the visual effects industry. What is it about the competitive software that you like so much? What is the 1 or 2 features that are keeping you clinging to that software? What are the things that I could do? What would it take for you to recommend my software to other people? These are all the things he started to think about, and this is what changed everything. And it meant that he was able to do things that he wouldn't have otherwise done, because for him to hit that other goal, what he's doing currently isn't working. But by setting the bigger goal, yes, he didn't hit 12 by the end of the year. He hit 8, which is almost 3 times the original goal that he had set out to do. So which is better? You doing what you're currently doing and trying to work harder and bang the hammer more, or saying, maybe I got to take a step back and look at it from a different angle now that this goal isn't achievable, it's not possible with the current way that I'm doing things, the current way that I work, the current way that I approach problems does not solve this issue. So finally, I want you to think about who it is that you see as being successful, because I think that most of us would say that those successful people wouldn't be where they are today if that 1 or 2 or 3 or 5 big obstacles that they faced, the things that really mattered that they had to overcome, they were just willing to settle. They had said they'd gone as far as they could, or that's impossible, that they couldn't overcome this big obstacle. That big domino that knocked all the other ones down and got them the success, got them the result. If those successful people convinced themselves that they had this big grand dream, but it was simply impossible, they should just settle. They should just be happy with where they are. Look, I want you to strive for better. I want you to strive to break that 4-minute mile that you believe is impossible. Steve Jobs said this beautiful quote that I love, which is, "The people who are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones who do." We can't strive for better by giving in to our limitations. So never get comfortable. Pay attention to every single time you shoot down an idea or you hear or tell yourself, that's impossible. This is your chance to break the habit and say, well, if that was possible, what would that look like? That's the first question, the first step to getting to the next level. Nobody got anywhere by staying in their comfort zone and not pushing for bigger, better things. There were so many goals in my career that I hit that at one point I told myself, that's impossible. That's impossible, but what if? What if it was possible? Then what would that look like and how would I go about doing it? I hope you got a lot from this, and if you want the playbook on negotiating for artists, how to negotiate anything, check out the link in the description for the free playbook. Okay, so question of the day. What barriers and mindsets have you set on yourself over your career? What are the things that you've told yourself that you want to start to challenge and change? Leave a comment below and let me know. Thanks for watching. If you want to check out more, I'll be posting videos every single week. On top of that, if you can like, subscribe, share, and more importantly, take action. Apply these methods, apply these insights, and get change and success in your career. I want to see the results. Oh hey, if you like this video, go check out the video on Is There Money in Art? It should be around here somewhere. Okay, thanks for watching.